I just got my ballot in the mail and I thought we could talk politics for a little bit. So about 3,400 years ago, the Jewish people, God's people at the time, were not ruled by a democracy like ours today. They were not ruled by a monarchy or any other political system. Rather, they were ruled by a theocracy. And a theocracy meant just that their ultimate authority and ruler was God himself. And God ruled people through different leaders who he had appointed at the time. And the Old Testament calls these leaders judges. Now, judges are more like consultants or supports than they are politicians, or kings or anything like that. They primarily helped out with things like leading military campaigns or being a decision maker in legal matters, or they offered some spiritual guidance. But these were all areas where they would step in, complete a task, and then step out. They weren't just permanent governors. They weren't leading, they weren't trying to create dynasties. They weren't collecting taxes. They weren't acknowledged as like an ultimate authority beyond their God appointment for particular tasks. So when that was happening, the Jewish people kind of looked around them and they saw that the other nations, the other people groups, were starting to be ruled by kings. And this seemed very attractive to them. They thought, I like this system. This seems like this could bring about greater unity or security. And so they asked the judge at the time, Samuel, if they could have a king. Like, Samuel was getting towards the end of his life. His sons weren't going to be the best people to come in and step in as judges. And so they suggested that they get a king for themselves. And, Samuel told them, this is not a great idea. Like, you have the best possible leader you could possibly have in God. Why would you put a human in its place? That's just going to go poorly for you. And the people keep asking. And so Samuel goes and he chats about it with God. And, God says the same thing as like, these people are not just rejecting you as a judge, like they're ultimately rejecting me. And Samuel goes back to the people and shares with them what God shared, that, it's not going to go well. And so I'm just going to read it. This is from 1 Samuel 8. So Samuel's telling the people, this is the kind of king this is the way the kind of king you're talking about operates. He'll take your sons and make soldiers of them, chariotry, cavalry, infantry, regimented in battalions and squadrons. He'll put some to forced labor on farms, plowing and harvesting, and others to making either weapons of war or chariots in which he can ride in luxury. He'll put your daughters to work as beauticians, waitresses, and cooks. He'll conscript your best fields, vineyards, and orchards, and hand them over to his special friends. He'll tax your harvests and vintages to support his extensive bureaucracy. Your prize workers and best animals he'll take for his own use. He'll lay a tax on your flocks, and you'll end up no better than slaves. The day will come when you will cry in desperation because of this king you so much want for yourselves, but don't expect God to answer. But the people wouldn't listen to Samuel. No, they said, we will have a king to rule us, then we'll be just like all the other nations. One king will rule us, lead us, and fight our battles. And so God blessed them have a king. And sure enough, exactly what Samuel told them would happen. These kings were imperfect people who were just like the rest of us, corruptible, and had selfish motives and imperfect wisdom, and things didn't go well. And that started with Saul and then David and Solomon. Even the best ones weren't perfect, and all on and on and on. We see that even today, that there is no politician, there is no political party that we don't see those same traits of infallibility, imperfect wisdom, greed, corruption. So what I would urge you is that while I do think it's good to vote, and it is good to try to align your vote with whichever, political party or politician at the time is most aligned with Christian values, there is no perfect party. There is not even a more perfect party. in our current system. One party does some things well, another party does other things well. They both do a lot poorly. And so if we put our faith in a political party and all our hopes in a political party, we are making the exact same mistake that God's people did all those years ago. So while God doesn't tell us who to vote for, God does instruct us how to treat people regardless of who we vote for. And in particular, I want to call out how we treat people who vote differently than us. There is this scripture that is often read at weddings in 1 Corinthians that talks about love. And it's read at weddings because, we associate love with weddings. But this text was actually written to God's people who were creating divisions and factions within themselves based on different leaders they wanted to follow. And so I actually think that this scripture is more appropriate for us in this context. And I just want to read it. And I want you to have in mind the people who vote differently than you as I read it. So it says, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now, faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of those is love." Okay, so all of that said, the takeaway I think is do your best. Do your best this election season, and do your best always to care for those around you, because that is what ultimately matters. We can, whoever the political party is in power, God is still ultimately in charge, and we can still have direct access to Him and to live out His values and bring about His kingdom on earth. And one of the ways we do that is by loving others, and in particular those who disagree with us. So in the comments, I would love to hear which political party right now you think best aligns with the Christian faith and why, or just share how you love those who disagree with you politically, or how we could do that better. And of course, if you have any questions about Christianity or religion in general, go ahead and put those in the comments too. I'll answer them there or in a future video. And if you would like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.